All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Ellen Pinto, and I'm an advisor with the Office of MD Admissions here at the University of Calgary. And here in the office, we advise prospective applicants and we process applications into the medical doctor or the MD program here at the University of Calgary. And so I'm here today to provide you with an overview of the admissions process with respect to the medical doctor program here at UC. So I just want to start by doing a land acknowledgement. So the University of Calgary, located in the heart of Southern Alberta, both acknowledges and pays tribute to the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7, which include the Blackfoot Confederacy, including the Siksika, Piikani, Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstone First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation within Alberta, Nose Hill Métis District 5, and Elbow Métis District 6. So I just want to start by providing an overview of the medical doctor program here at UC. So our program is 3 years in length. So it consists of 2 years of pre-clerkship and 1 year of clerkship. So it's a little bit unique in sort of the medical school landscape in Canada, because most medical school programs in Canada are about 4 years in length. And our program is one of 3 in the country that is 3 years long. And so on average, each year we have approximately 180 seats available, but it does vary. For example, the class of 2028, they just started in July of this past year, and it consists of 185 students. About 85% of our seats are reserved for Albertans, and I'll explain a little bit more about what we mean by that and who we deem as an Albertan in the next slide. But applicants need to be Canadian citizens, permanent residents, or hold convention refugee status in order to apply. At this point in time, we do not accept applications from individual international students. And so our application cycle typically runs from early July, and then the application will close in early October. And then classes would begin the following July. And so the cost for the program is approximately 30,000 Canadian per year at this time. All right, so who is eligible to apply? So you can apply as either an Albertan or a non-Albertan. If you're applying as an Albertan, you would need to have completed 2 full-time undergraduate years and achieve an overall GPA across those years of 3.2 or above. You would also need to write the entire MCAT exam, but for Albertans, no minimum scores need to be achieved on any sections or on the exam overall. You just need to write the exam and release those scores to us. And so who do we consider an Albertan? So for us, an Albertan is someone that has been living within the province of Alberta on a day-to-day basis for 24 consecutive months at some point between their 15th birthday and the first day of classes in medical school. And so that first day of classes in medical school is going to depend on when you apply. So just keep that in mind. If you're applying as a non-Albertan, again, you still need to complete 2 full-time undergraduate years. You need a slightly higher overall GPA at 3.8, and you do need to achieve a minimum score of 128 on the CARS section of the MCAT exam. Now, you still need to write the entire MCAT exam, but you do need to hit that minimum of 128 on the CARS section in order to have your application moved forward. And a common question we get is, which undergraduate degree should I pursue to complete my 2 full-time undergraduate years then? We really have no preference. A lot of folks think that they need to complete that education, in a STEM subject like science, for example, but that's not the case. It's really up to you. We suggest choosing something that you're really interested in, and therefore, will ultimately do better in. In terms of where the coursework needs to be completed, that does matter. So the coursework needs to be completed at either an MD PhD granting school, or the coursework needs to be transferable to an MD PhD granting school. So I'll just give you a little bit of an example here. So in Alberta, for example, we have 2 MD PhD granting schools. We have the University of Alberta and the University of Calgary. These are both MD PhD granting schools because they both have medical schools and they will both grant PhD degrees. Now, that's not to say that you can't complete the education elsewhere, for example, Mount Royal University or the University of Lethbridge. You would just need to ensure that that coursework is transferable to either U of C or U of N. All right. I also want to highlight some additional applicant processes that we have. The first being the Indigenous applicant process. So Indigenous applicants that choose to apply through this process will be considered Albertan for the purposes of applying. So they would need to meet the Albertan criteria. They would automatically be invited to interview, and their scores would be standardized against a historical Indigenous cohort, not the current applicant cohort. Additionally, we also have the Black applicant admissions process. So this is open to applicants that voluntarily self-identify as Black. And depending on their residency, they would, again, still need to meet those metrics that we discussed before. So if they're Albertans, they would need to meet those metrics. If they're non-Albertans, they would need to meet those metrics. But they would be invited to discuss why they've chosen to apply through this process in their personal essay, and they would have members of the BIPOC community engage in their file review and their interview process. All right, so what is involved in putting together an application to apply to U of C's medical school? So these are some of the things that we would ask for. We would collect demographic data. We would ask for your academic record, your MCAT scores, your official transcripts, employment history, awards, publications if you have them. We have one course that we require all applicants to take prior to applying, and that's the Indigenous Foundational Knowledge Requirement. So this is a course that we ask all applicants to take, and it just ensures that all applicants have an understanding of Indigenous history, past and present here in Canada. And within our applicant manual, which I will link at the end, we have a number of options for this requirement for meeting it. Additionally, you would be invited to list your top 10 experiences, provide 3 reference letters, a personal essay, and then we have an application fee, which is currently $150 Canadian. And I will touch on the top 10 experiences and also how to go about choosing a reference in just a little bit later on in the presentation. Okay, I also wanted to highlight a new program that we have started up this year. We just started accepting applications to this program for this cycle, and the first cohort is expected to start in July of next year. So this is the Southern Alberta Medical Program, or SAMP, and this is a new partnership between the University of Calgary and the University of Lethbridge. And students who apply and are accepted into the MD program via SAMP will undergo their 3 years of medical training at the University of Lethbridge, not here at the University of Calgary. And so the hope here really is that those students will, really get to immerse themselves within Southern Alberta and rural communities there throughout their medical school training. And so in order to apply for SAMP, again, depending on your residency, Albertan, non-Albertan, we need to meet that criteria. But in addition to that, you also need to provide an additional reference letter and an additional essay that would highlight your experience with rural communities and your interest in pursuing rural medicine. All right, so once you've submitted an application, it will undergo file review if you've met all of our eligibility criteria. So your file will then be reviewed holistically by 4 file reviewers and scored across 7 attributes. And these reviewers will include a faculty member, a medical student or resident, a community member, and then an allied health professional. And so here we have a further breakdown of how one is scored during the file review or the pre-interview. You can see here 20% of your score comes from the GPA, 10% from the MCAT scores, and then 70% from the scores that you receive for those 7 attributes. And so, these attributes include things like communication skills, interpersonal skills, commitment to community, intellectual curiosity. Again, those are just a few of the 7 that would be looked at. All right, and just going back again to the application, I mentioned I would discuss a little bit more about the top 10 experiences. So this is a chance for applicants to list up to 10 top experiences from their lives that they feel have, really defined them as a person or have really shaped them. We keep some of the criteria for this quite broad. So, these experiences can be volunteer experiences, employment experiences, life experiences, or events. It's really up to you. And ideally, they would highlight things like advocacy, collaboration, organization, those traits that we sort of saw within the attributes before. And I just wanted to mention here, if you have an activity that you've done for a lot of your life, for example, competitive sports, you've played on multiple teams or leagues, you can collapse these activities into one and include them just as one entry within the top 10. Additionally, we get a lot of questions about how to go about choosing a reference. So all applicants are asked to provide 3 references. If you're applying to stamp, we would need to then ask for a 4th reference as well. And so really the key here is that the title and the status of the referee do not matter, but objective credibility is quite important. So these referees should not be family, friends, peers. They should be folks that know you well and can address these 3 attributes in you. And so these attributes include interpersonal behaviors and collaboration, organizational management and leadership skills, commitment to communities, and advocacy. We also get the question, are physicians, doctors, professors better referees? Not necessarily. If that physician or doctor or professor doesn't know you very well, cannot speak to these attributes in you, they might not be the best reference to choose. All right, so after file review, we move on to the second stage of the admissions process, which are the multiple mini interviews. So after file review, if your file review score is high enough, you would then be invited to the multiple mini interviews. And we invite about 600-ish applicants each year to these multiple mini interviews. All right, so these interviews, they may be virtual or they may be in person. Typically, they're in person and they're held towards the end of winter. And so at these interviews, applicants are given situational scenarios that they may encounter working as a medical professional. And then they're asked to discuss how they may choose to respond to those scenarios. Again, the number of situations really depends from year to year. And, as these are interviews, you can't per se study for them, but you can prepare. And I've listed a resource here. This is the STEP program or the Support to Entry program, and they offer free resources such as MMI preparation for folks. And again, we have more information about this program, again, within our applicant manual, which I will link at the end. All right, so after the interviews, we then tabulate an applicant's final score. So the final score is made up of the file review or pre-interview score, so 50%. And then the interview score or the MMI score, which is 50%. We put it together, we get your final score, and the folks that rank the highest are then, offered admission into the program based on the number of seats that we have for that year. So, overall, it is a competitive process for sure. To give you some numbers, this year we had 2,000 plus applications, and of course we only had, 180 to 190 seats each year. So it is competitive, but these are sort of our recommendations to hopefully, help you along the process. So in terms of, choosing what to study in order to, meet our minimums of the 2 full-time undergraduate years, we suggest studying something that you're interested in, excited about. We just find that folks do better in something that they enjoy, they get better grades. When you're putting together your application, definitely highlight your strengths. Be genuine, be honest, show us what you're passionate about. And then have a backup plan. Many folks apply multiple times to multiple schools. And if it doesn't work out for whatever reason, it's just good to have a backup plan, another career path that you would be interested in pursuing. And of course, please read the applicant manual. Again, will be linked at the end. This is just such a helpful resource. It has in it everything that I've said to you today. In addition to that, it has all of our deadlines, all of the documents that you would need to provide. And we're very strict with our deadlines, especially because they are there in an applicant manual, so we don't make exceptions. So really important to be on top of that. And we release a new one every year. So there's one out currently for this cycle, but really important that you thoroughly read it, especially the year that you're applying. Things change. For example, this year we had the addition of the Southern Alberta Medical Program that was added to the manual. And then in terms of, when you're trying to gather information, word of mouth we find is not the best way. A lot of misinformation gets spread that way. Please use the applicant manual. We also have an admissions blog, which I will also link for you at the end. And then you can always reach out to us here in the office. We have an email, a phone number. You can also just walk in. We have a physical location on the Foothills campus. So yeah. And then I just wanted to add a little bit about what is expected of students once they enter the program. So it's a 3-year medical school program. And so you don't get spring and summer semesters off. So with a 4-year program, between May and August, you have time off. But with our program, you wouldn't, right? So you would still be in school, you would still be learning. And, we expect students to be available between about 8:30 and 5:30, Monday to Friday. And all students should expect to do about 8 to 16 weeks of their clinical experience. So this is during the pre-clerkship and clerkship years outside of the city of Calgary. So in more rural areas such as Medicine Hat or Brooks or Red Deer, just to name a few. There are some other locations as well. All right, and finally we have our contact information. So again, my name is Helen Pinto. We have a general email here, ucmedapp@ucalgary.ca. We also have a general phone number. Our office hours are Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. We have a physical office, room G212, over in the Health Sciences Center on the Foothills campus, so not the main campus. And then we have our links here. So we have a general website, admissions website. We have our blog. We also have a link to the applicant manual. Again, such a useful resource. Would highly recommend, going through that. And if questions arise, definitely reach out to us. We are happy to help. And yeah, that's all I have for you. Thank you so much. I see we have some questions here. Okay, so can we get the presentation later? So I believe it's been recorded and it's going to be posted if I'm correct. So I think you should be able to rewatch it later. After application is submitted, does the UC also have secondaries that will be requested to be submitted? So our application deadline is pretty final. We basically ask for everything then. We have this year, it was October 1st, and so we asked for all of the documents at that time. If we need anything else from you, then we do reach out. And then is it possible to receive this PowerPoint by email? I can double check and let you know, maybe if Monmoy can give me your information later. Okay. How would I be able to enter items in my top 10 for which I have no formal record keeping or supervisor for? For example, if I mentored students on an informal basis and want to talk about that in my top 10. So you can. For the top 10 experiences, we typically ask for a verifier, just to verify, if it's a volunteer activity or work activity that it happened. But if you don't have someone to verify that activity, it is okay. There's an option to not put down a verifier. Okay, if I lived in Alberta for 6 years, but took my undergrad in Ontario, would I be considered out of province? So again, to meet Alberta residency, it's living in Alberta for 24 consecutive months between your 15th birthday and the first day of classes. So likely, if you graduated high school in Alberta, you would likely be considered Albertan, because between your 15th birthday and turning 18, you've likely done 2 full years here consecutively. Yeah, so I would say likely you'd be considered Albertan, but if you're still feeling like unsure, you can definitely email us and we can discuss your situation a bit more. Can you apply without ever finishing your undergrad if applying after only completing the first 2 years? Yes. So if you complete your first our minimum is 2 full-time undergraduate years. So yes, you can apply without completing your undergraduate degree. So you can apply, if you meet all of the criteria, you could apply the summer after your second year. And then the admissions process takes a year. So then you would, likely be doing your third year. Let's say you get admitted, you would then be able to join the medical school without completing your undergraduate degree. Yes. Okay. So would any place outside of Calgary be allowed for clerkship, pre-clerkship, or would it just be medicine half? Yeah, so for those 8 to 16 weeks of clinical experience outside of Calgary, there's a few locations. In terms of getting a specific location, I think that would really depend on the year. I just know that there's a few locations that you can go to. It's not just Medicine Hat. But in terms of if you're only interested in a certain location, I think that would just be something to be discussed once you're in the program. Okay, I think I've answered maybe. Okay, got another one. I heard your worst year is taken out for GPA calculation. For example, out of 4 for a bachelor's. Is this still true? So yes, so we would drop your lowest full-time undergraduate year if you have 3 or more full-time undergraduate years and you've completed a bachelor's degree. So that's sort of the scenario. The other sort of case is, let's say you apply after your third year, and now you have 3 full-time undergraduate years. You apply the summer after your third year, and then during the admission cycle that year, you're doing year 4. And after year 4, you're going to get your degree in May to June, and then you're going to enter the medical school. So in that case, we would also drop your lowest year because you have 3 full-time undergraduate years and you get your degree right before you start medical school. You would then drop your lowest full-time year. But the years need to be full-time. You need to have at least 3 full-time undergraduate years and anticipate completing your undergrad degree or have already completed your undergrad degree. Okay. If no preferences, what would be undergraduate programs to be helpful for the MD program? Again, it's really up to you. So like I said, it's true, we don't have any preferences in terms of which undergrad you choose. If you are interested in health and medicine, you may choose an undergrad program that is more related to that, but you don't have to. So yeah, in our applicant manual, I will say I believe it's Appendix 5 of our applicant manual, very close to the end. We have a list of recommended undergraduate courses that you could take. They're not required, they're recommended. And those contain things like physics, chemistry, biology, anatomy, that sort of stuff. But it's not required, just recommended. So you might consider looking at that, and despite whatever degree you choose, you might consider sprinkling some of those courses in there. Okay. What are some advice you would give to grade 12 students aiming to get into this school? What are some activities and preparations that would make one's application more favorable? Great question. Yeah. So, in terms of the activities that we do, for those top 10s, for example, doing something and being committed to it for longer than doing little short activities here and there, doing something here for a month, another thing here for 2 months, staying committed to something is probably going to be more favorable, especially when it comes to, references and all of that. We just ask folks to do things that they're interested in, that they're passionate about. It doesn't have to be hospital or clinic related. You don't have to volunteer in a hospital or in a clinic. Those attributes, things like communication skills and interpersonal skills, you can learn those and, be practicing those, doing all kinds of activities, sports, volunteer work, just working. So doing something, staying committed to it, and just being passionate about what you do, I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. Okay. Do other sections of the MCAT get looked at, or can I just focus on CARS? So CARS is important, but so is the overall exam. There are So for cars is 10% of that value score. But your entire MCAT is also looked at and taken into account. So you shouldn't sort of just leave that. That will also be looked at. But the cars portion does count for 10% of the file review score. Great, I'll review the applicant manual. Awesome. Yeah, please do. It's got a lot of information. It is a little long, but go through it slowly and then you can reach out to us for more questions. Would you mind repeating the name of the document where you can find the recommended undergraduate programs? Right, so it's Appendix 5 of the applicant manual. It's just towards the end, and it's not recommended undergrad programs, it's recommended undergrad courses. We don't recommend any programs, again, really up to you what program you choose, but yeah, Appendix 5 of the applicant manual. Okay, so for your tops and experiences, what are some examples of things we should not put, experiences that are too common and less meaningful? So I can't exactly speak to that in terms of specifics. Again, really things that you feel have really defined and shaped you. You know, it could be the same experience a bunch of other people have, but you have a chance to talk about it and describe what it's meant to you. And what you've gotten out of it. And that could be, you know, the difference between you and other applicants, right? So, you know, we have all kinds of things like in the applicant manual, I think we have like the example of like working at McDonald's or like playing hockey. You know, what you get out of that experience and how you describe it, like that is also really important. Okay, I think I've answered all the questions here. Not sure if there's anything else within the Facebook live chat or anything else. Oh, we got another one. I accessed the Calgary Facebook website, but can't reporting that happened for the last few weeks. Can you share the link, please? Okay, I think Monroy will do that. Yeah, I'm not seeing any other questions. If you do have questions, please, yeah, put them in. Happy to answer. Okay, what are some general advice for younger students and how to know medical school is the right path for them? Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I know that there are some programs out there for you to get more acquainted with healthcare professions in high school, for example. So you could look into some of those. For example, like one I remember, it's like Careers the Next Generation, that sometimes gets, you know, students out and working in a hospital environment. So you could also search for those opportunities yourself. You know, perhaps volunteering or working in a hospital setting or a health clinic setting. So you could try doing that. Additionally, you know, taking more health-related classes, for example, anatomy, just trying different things to see if you're interested in it at a younger age before, you know, kind of getting to the undergraduate level. So yeah, I would suggest some of those. Okay, so I'm applying as a mature student and I'm wondering if you are able to share if there are many mature students that apply. I saw in the manual / admission that there are many, that there may be about 1 to 2 mature students admitted, and was hoping we could speak more about this. Yeah, so I can't speak to exact numbers for folks that are admitted, but we have lots of mature students apply. We have folks from all stages of life apply. So like I said, the minimum is those 2 full-time undergraduate years, right? And so, yeah, we have folks applying at that stage, but we have folks applying after their bachelor's degree. We have folks applying after getting a master's degree, after a PhD degree, after working for like 5, 10, 20 years in whichever field and then applying. Yeah, so we have folks from all walks of life applying, and we're so happy about that. So, yeah. Which medical programs do you offer? Any dentistry slash specialty? So University of Calgary doesn't have a dental school. This is just a medical doctor program. So you get a medical doctor degree after those 3 years, and then you would move on to residency, which is where you would specialize in things like family medicine or cardiology or surgery, so forth. So that's kind of where the specialization comes in, is after medical school during residency. I'm not seeing any other questions. If for whatever reason I missed your question, like feel free to copy and paste, post it again. Thank you for your time and effort. Yeah, no, thank you guys so much. I'm so happy to share this information with you all. Okay, do you find neurodivergent applicants unfavorable? Are there any support given to these applicants, or are their disabilities not considered at all in the application process? So for folks that need accommodation, sorry, I missed 2 other questions. I will come back to those, but let me just answer this first. So if you need accommodations at all, we actually work with student accessibility services. And so if you need accommodations, prior to submitting your application, during the admissions process, for example, during the medical mini interviews or within medical school, student accessibility services on campus is a huge resource, and we work with them. So typically what we ask applicants to do is reach out to them, and they will discuss with you, and if there's any accommodations that they feel need to be provided, they would then let us know, and we wouldn't know, kind of anything that has gone on there in terms of the discussions, but we would then just provide those accommodations during the admissions process. So yeah, no, it's not unfavorable. We are happy to have everyone, but we work with student accessibility services for sure. Yeah. Okay, sorry. And then we have, if I was born in Alberta and lived there for 10 years and then moved to a different province after that, would I be considered an Albertan? So what I'm sort of getting here is you're born here or born in Alberta and then are here for 10 years, right? So you're 10 and then you leave Alberta. So our residency starts at 15. So after your 15th birthday and the first day of classes, have you been living in Alberta for 24 consecutive months? So if that's not the case, you would not be considered Albertan for the purposes of applying. Will there be more meetings as such? So yeah, we don't have any plans right now to provide any more info sessions, but we are very accessible. Like again, phone, email, come visit us in the office. We're here Monday to Friday. So yeah, if you have specific questions, definitely reach out to us. do you have any advice in preparing for the main interviews? Yeah, great question. So on the admissions website, there is a little bit more information about the MMIs. It talks a little bit about sort of attributes that are looked for. I think there might be some example questions as well. And I can quickly let me just stop sharing my screen here and just quickly look. But yeah, within the admissions website, we do have some more information on MMI that would help folks prepare. And like I said, there was that program, support to entry or STEP, that also provides some help when it comes to MMI preparation. So I'm just going to take a moment and quickly search. Let me just share my screen one more time. Okay, I hope we can see this. So this is just our admissions website. So that first link I provided would take you to, oh, one sec. Would take you to this website. So that first link. And that's where we have our applicant manual, admissions blog, our application. And then if you go future students, MMI information, you can click on that. And so there's a lot of information here. Some of the attributes that are looked for, things you need to be able to maybe demonstrate throughout the medical need interviews. And then there's actually a presentation that is provided here that you can also view and look at. That would also be helpful. Yeah, so I would totally look at this. And then here, if you say, please click here, you can access some questions. I'm not sure. Yeah, here we go. So these are just some example scenarios and how they may potentially be graded. So there's one, but it's something. Yeah, so I would definitely look at that. Let me just stop sharing. Okay. Okay, what do you like most about being in med school? At what point when you can specialize in a certain area? Okay, so I just like to preface, I am not in medical school. I'm just an advisor with the office. So speaking to medical students at our open house, we did actually have a number of medical students there. But in terms of specializing in a certain area, that comes during residency. So those first 3 years, you're doing a lot of learning in medical school. For the 3 years, you're doing a lot of learning. And then in that last year clerkship, you are doing a lot of rotations at different hospitals and clinics in different specialties. So things like pediatrics or, in internal medicine, for example. So you're getting a feel for these different areas. And then after that, you would then interview and would be matched to a residency program somewhere in Canada. And that's where you'd specialize in what you're going to be practicing. So family medicine, or cardiology, or what have you. So that comes during residency. If I finish a class in May, would this be counted? I understand in the manual that only classes completed between September and April are used in the GPA calculation. Yeah, this is a great question. So I think I had said, we require 2 full-time undergraduate years. Our definition of full-time is quite specific. So our definition of full-time is you're taking courses between September and April. You're taking a total of 24 credits, and at least 18 of those credits are graded. So they are not pass-fail. And so we do adhere pretty strictly to this timeline. It does need to be between September and April. We do not count spring and summer courses in the GPA calculation. That would still be viewable to file reviewers when they're looking at your application, but it wouldn't be counted towards your GPA. So that is really important when you're kind of putting together your degree and, how many courses are you taking, if you want to be eligible to apply, after 2 years. Great. Okay. So what are some strengths that Calgary's medical school has over other Canadian medical schools? Yeah, so I think, one of the biggest points is it is a 3-year program. Most medical schools in Canada are 4 years in length. And that's because they are able to, be off between May to August. But for us, you would still be, learning, going to school during that time. And so that faster timeline might be, exciting for some that want to complete their education more quickly. For others, perhaps, you want that time in between to do other things. You're not, you're not in as much of a rush to complete medical school that quickly. So that's really something to think about, is that it's a little bit more, condensed. And you are kind of in school all year round. You do still get breaks, 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there, but it's just not as big of a break as 4-year programs would give. And then additionally, I think the experience in rural communities in Alberta. So I mentioned the 8 to 16 weeks that all medical students are required to do, outside of the city of Calgary and different, smaller cities and towns. But you can actually extend that. There's a program called UCLIC, and I believe you can do might be 32 weeks with UCLIC. You can spend that time, spend those 32 weeks outside of the city of Calgary doing your training in, smaller localities. So yeah, I would say that, and then of course the shorter timeline for medical school. We'll just put up the contact slide in my time. Okay, if you've completed your 4-year undergrad from another university, such as MRU, can I apply for MD at U of C? Yeah, so what you just want to ensure is that the coursework is transferable to U of C. And the way you can check that is, again, there's another website. It's just U of C transfer credit. Again, let me just find it. And you can just put your course in there, like if it's like Bio 211. You can just put that in, search, and it should pop up, especially for MRU. And it'll tell you if it's transferable or not. You just want to make sure in your full-time undergraduate years that 24 credits, those courses are individually transferable, not the whole block, but each course is individually transferable to an MD PhD school like U of C. So let me just find the website quickly. So I hope you can see this. This is just the transfer credit website for U of C. Also, if the coursework transfers to U of A, that's accepted as well, because U of A is also an MD PhD granting school. Yeah, but this is the tool that you can use. You can just put in, I guess I have one that I'll put in here, or I can just search it. Okay, so this one doesn't pop up. Let me just see if I have any other questions in the chat. Okay, I'll just see if I can put in one other one. Maybe apology. Right, and so this was a course that was done at Mount Royal. And so it'll tell you it's completed between 2008 to present. Yes, you can click on it, and transferable. Yes, right. So yeah, so that's how you can check. If you're having trouble, try U of A as well. And we also recommend Transfer Alberta, which is just like a provincial transfer website. But all it would do is just allow you to check if the course is transferable to U of A or U of C. So you could use that, but you might as well just use the individual university website. Okay. So I had used Transfer Alberta to check transferable classes, which seemed to differ from the U of C transfer credit website. Which one should be the one we use? So it just needs to transfer via one of the sites. If it transfers via one, we will accept it. Just take a screenshot in case we, require documentation later about the transferability. Just because if we ask, you have that documentation. So it just needs to transfer via one of the websites, either Transfer Alberta, U of C's transfer website, or U of A's transfer website. And if you live in another, if you live in another province, you go to school in another province, for example, and you go to a smaller university, if the coursework from that smaller school transfers to an MD PhD school in that province, we would accept it. So for example, British Columbia, if you go to a smaller institution in BC, but that coursework, each course individually transfers to UBC, we would accept that because UBC has a medical school and grants PhDs. So that also works. Because I know it's a little tricky. If you go to a smaller school in BC, for example, and you try and use U of C's transfer website, it might not work. Okay. For students living far away, would a virtual interview be disadvantageous for their application? In what ways would it be different from an in-person interview? So, so interviews are either virtual or in person. But it just depends on the year. So virtual interviews were introduced during, the pandemic. But since last year, I believe, U of C has done their interviews in person. So there isn't like an option for applicants, whether they get to choose whether it's virtual or in person. If it's in person for that year, it's in person for everybody. If it's virtual for that year, it's virtual for everybody. But again, last year we did it in person. This year we're planning to do it in person as well. So we would require applicants to physically be here for those interviews. And I guess in terms of the differences between in-person and virtual, unfortunately, I can't speak too much to that. I haven't been here while virtual interviews have been going on, but again, I can ask around and I can get you that information. If you just email us, we can look into it for you. Here that again. Looks like we have about 9 minutes left. So if you have any more questions, please put them in the chat. I'm very happy to answer. Do you have any advice for preparing for the MCAT exam? Yeah, so great question. So a couple of things. The recommended courses in Appendix 5 of the applicant manual, those could potentially help you prepare for the MCAT exam. Additionally, in our applicant manual, it's under the section that says financial aid, but it links you to Khan Academy and resources there that you could use to study for the MCAT, so just free online resources that you could use. Additionally, we know that there are sort of these like workshop programs are out there that help folks prepare for the MCAT. We are not affiliated with any, so it's not discouraged or encouraged, I guess. We have no issue with folks, signing up for those like paid programs to help like study for the MCAT. But we don't have one that we like recommend or one that we've put together. So really up to you, if you decide to pay for something like that and use that to help you study for the MCAT. Yeah, that's sort of what I would say. The thing is, the MCAT exam is not something that we administer. I mean, lots of medical schools, not only in Canada, but like North America use it. So, I'm sure there's a lot of free resources online, but that's kind of what we have out there, Khan Academy, and then some of those recommended courses, and potentially if you want to sign up for some kind of program. Okay, with the health sciences undergrad program at Calgary, which is also in the Cumming School of Medicine, be beneficial to getting into the medical doctor program as it is in the same faculty. Yeah, great question. So yeah, the Cumming School of Medicine, I believe, has like 2 undergraduate programs, one being health sciences and the other one is community rehabilitation, if I'm not mistaken. No, it wouldn't be advantageous per se. If you're taking like a STEM undergraduate program, many of those, especially in the first year, do have, some of those recommended courses that we suggest. Again, not required, suggest like biology and chemistry and things like that. So perhaps, you might have an advantage in that way, but that wouldn't just be from health sciences. That could be from any science that we take. Getting some of those first year science courses that could potentially help you with writing the MCAT exam. But no, you don't have to do a bachelor's program within the Cumming School of Medicine. It wouldn't help you in any way. It wouldn't be advantageous in any way over taking a program in another faculty. Where will the recording of this live be? I can't see it on the Facebook account. Again, I'm not sure. I will let Moy answer that for you. If I take a non-science bachelor program, could it become a disadvantage? No, so again, we really don't have a preference. We do have folks apply from all kinds of bachelor's degrees. I guess it just sort of depends on how you like set up your degree. Like some degrees, there's certain courses you have to take within the first 2 years and whatnot. And so if you're looking to take maybe some of those recommended courses, maybe that might be hard to mesh together. And also in terms of, setting up your degree to be full-time, right? So to be able to do your courses September to April, taking 24 total credits, 18 graded, you would just want to make sure you're able to do that in the program that you choose, but no, not, being in a program that is not science related will not disadvantage you.